Welcome to More Than Legal, the show where we go behind the scenes to uncover the fine print of power, purpose, and profit. I'm your host, attorney Danielle Laughlin. After almost 2 decades in the trenches of courtrooms and boardrooms, I have learned that every move leaves a mark and every deal tells a story. What will we uncover today? Let's find out. Hey, real quick, before we dive into the episode, remember, nothing you hear on this podcast is intended to be legal, financial, or tax advice. I invite you to contact any of the guests you hear by looking in the show notes for their contact information, or if you'd like to reach out to me, you can find my contact information at daniellelaughlin.com. All right, now let's get into it. Hey, welcome back to More Than Legal. I'm your host, Danielle Laughlin, and I am here to introduce you to someone that I met in a very unique way. His name is Anthony Lamot, and he is the former CEO and co-founder of a company known as DESelect. DESelect is a marketing platform that was optimized for the Salesforce Marketing Cloud. I learned a little bit about that from Anthony before we got started. I'm not going any further there because I'm just not a technologist, but suffice it to say that he had a successful exit just last September. And now he is into some really cool stuff around lucid dreaming, and he's just a really interesting person. So I invited him here to share his journey, being a co-founder, exiting, having investors, and then now he's also helping to advise other founders that are going through venture and angel funding. And he's going to talk a little bit more about his current state and next steps. So you can hear a little bit more about him now. Anthony, thank you for coming on today. What do you want people to know about you?
Well, thank you for the amazing introduction, Danielle. I could not have done it better. And it's a pleasure to be here, especially after how we met and all that. What I would like people to know about me, it's a great question. I like to probably know them that I like for them to know that I've had quite an interesting ride as a technology founder, and there's so much to learn and so much to share. I also like to think of myself a little bit as a consciousness explorer, in that I've been fascinated with lucid dreaming for a very long time. I actually also originally studied psychology, but somehow ended up in tech, and we can talk about that. And that curiosity continues today. Today, I am still working for our acquirer Unaric, and that's interesting too, an interesting shift. And at the same time, I'm taking this time to kind of recharge and explore. And so I'm doing a lot of things, from going to conferences on dreaming, to reading philosophy, to studying physics right now.
Awesome. Well, we met in paradise, right? We met in such a unique way. And we were in a group of other entrepreneurs, investors, business leaders. And I just knew immediately, first of all, your energy is just a palpable energy. And anytime I encounter people that have that energy that just is so physically present, I just get excited, because I feel like people that manifest that from their bodies have tapped in, like you said, to a consciousness that I think we all should be continually aspiring to improve. And so it just really fascinated me. And then I heard your talk about lucid dreaming. And I told you I had a friend in college that kind of introduced me to it. But I didn't tell you that I studied philosophy. And I started as a psych major.
Amazing.
Yeah. And so, but I never took a psych class. I took my first philosophy class, 1L, or not 1L, that was law school later, but first year of undergrad, called Great Questions of Philosophy. And I immediately changed my major. And so I want to explore a little bit about some of the philosophy that you're reading. I think that would be really interesting for our guests and audience to hear. But let's tap into, I think I'm drawing a little bit of a correlation from marketing and psychology, right? Mm-hmm. So that really makes a lot of sense to me, because obviously marketing is very psychology driven.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Tell us about the tech turn. When did that happen?
Oh, that's a good question. That takes me back five lifetimes ago, I think. Honestly, it was coincidence and a little bit of dumb luck, so to wind it back, while I studied psychology, I ended up at a Big Four, and I started doing what we called at the time human capital consulting. So, for instance, my first project was to help completely reorganize a huge HR department of a major financial institution in Europe. However, after that, I wound up in the CRM department, which I had no idea what CRM was at the time, which is kind of funny. And then soon realized that I would rather be spreading my wings and work in the corporate military that I was working in. That's how I refer to my time there. We won't name names. But so I ended up being a contractor, and I got like really excited about it. I got a first project, which was pretty lucrative. Now, at the time when you start a company in Belgium, which is where I'm from, in case people are wondering about the accent, you had to actually put in quite a lot of capital, which me, as someone who had graduated only 2 years before, like I did not have money at the time. And so that was a big investment. But nonetheless, I had a great contract, and I was off to the races. And 2 months later, the plug got pulled on that project. And so the consulting company through which I had found the project at the time, they did like an evening talk to inform people about this setback, because it was a big project for them. There were multiple consultants on it. And then they said, well, there is this other thing. It's called Pardot, and it's one of the pieces that Salesforce offers around marketing. And we have another project in Norway, and we need someone to get hands-on with that. And so over the weekend, I got certified in Pardot. I learned all I could about marketing technology, and literally 1 week later, I was teaching about it, which is, I would say, a classic consulting move.
So true. We have an internal joke about consulting because we have clients that are consultants too, and I always say, like, we're building their contracts, and I'm like, so when we say consulting, like, how would you describe the services? And it's always very interesting what people say. So I love that. And it sounds like, too, that you're just a learner, right? So it's like you got an opportunity, and then you're a curious person. I think that's what I probably was super attracted to, because I'm very curious like that, too. And so you said, okay, well, I'm going to figure this out. And you're brilliant. I know that because I listened to you talk for a week, basically. And so you get into this, and then what happens next? So you're consulting on this. When did you found your co-founder? So how did you find your co-founder? Was it then, or did that come later?
Yeah, so it was then and later, in the sense that I know my co-founder from my very first job. And even the first CRM project I did, he was there too. We would go to the gym after very long hours, and then we would talk nonstop about startups and Eric Ries's book, The Lean Startup, and Y Combinator and all that. And he was actually the one who planted the seed in me to become a contractor, which at the time to me, it sounds stupid, like, oh, we have this amazing job and career opportunity at this amazing firm. But then the funny thing is that I actually left the company before him to become a contractor. And so we kept in touch. We actually did start working on one startup idea soon after becoming contractors and being independent consultants. But that didn't go anywhere. And that's maybe like one of the many lessons along the way. Like, I actually had 3 startups before DESelect that they made it to revenue. There was some interest, but they didn't get much further than that. And for me, it wasn't third try as a term. It was the 4th try that finally got me there. So persistence, hey.
Yeah.
But so that's how I met my co-founder, and we stayed in touch for a very long time. And then eventually, when I got the idea for the company that would then become DESelect, he was also the best suited, as far as I knew, in terms of background and skill set. And we had known each other for a long time, which goes a long way as well. So then I reached out, and that's how we began.
I love it so much. And this is very common in tech, right? Because we know, I mean, it's funny because growing up, it was like, become a doctor or a lawyer if you want to make a lot of money. And that's not why I became a lawyer. I really nerd out on that kind of thing. And my husband, he went to undergrad and came out, and now we're kind of comparing our income levels. And I'm like, it's so interesting because the tech industry went from really kind of nothing, and then sort of just really blew up. And now, of course, it's leading the world. I mean, just into all kinds of new directions. And all of that is so exciting, but there's also some downsides to that too. And I'm curious, going through the startup and the investment process, can you share a little bit with our audience about what it was like to, well, first of all, it's a capital intensive startup, right? All I needed to start my law firm was a laptop,
Yeah.
And it's like, in theory, that's kind of all you need, except you kind of need a whole team of developers, front end, back end, different types of experiences. You often have to buy licenses, obviously, with Salesforce type of stuff and things of that nature that are very costly. When did you know that you needed to start getting some investment? And tell us kind of how you went about it and what it was like to get your first check.
Well, I can go many directions with this. I think the funny part of this is that we didn't need capital. And I think also for the audience today, like, you probably need less capital than ever before because of AI. Obviously,
Yeah.
we'll talk about that. Now, our story is interesting in that we actually bootstrapped the company until we had well over $1 million in ARR, annual recurring revenue, which is a key metric in SaaS. And we did that in less than 2 years. And that is off the charts in terms of results, especially for being bootstrapped. And we were able to do that in part because we had our contracting jobs. And so there was a while where I think initially I was still consulting 3 days a week. And then the other 4 days a week, I was working on the startup. And when I say the other 4 days, I don't mean 9 to 5. I mean from waking up till going to bed at midnight, working 60, 70 hours a week. And my co-founder did something similar. And then so we kind of tapered down the consulting because we had mortgages and,
Correct.
had to eat. But then as soon as we had enough money from contracts that we always made our contracts annual upfront, which you can do in a B2B context, especially more enterprise-oriented context. It's even the standard. So that works very well for that. Once you do that, you have cash in the bank. And if you have one customer, that's maybe not enough to pay a full annual salary of someone, but it's enough to pay 1 month. And that 1 month can get you to the second customer and so on. And so that's a little bit the trick you can do in B2B SaaS, which I love. And this is probably my first or second most important lesson that I learned as a technology founder, which is try to sell before you build. And it's something that I tell my mentees or the startups that I coach as well. Many of them are like, I need to raise funds first, or I need to, especially if they're developers and they're technical founders, they have this amazing idea and they come and show me a whole product that looks like a fully fleshed platform. Then I go, amazing. How many customers do you have? Oh, I haven't pitched it yet. And that's just a major red flag. You need to go out and try to sell the vision that you have, even if it's just on slides, which is, by the way, what we did. We didn't write a single line of code until a first prospect asked for a quote, right? And that shocks most tech founders that I talk with because they're building. But you should really make sure that what you're building is valuable, and you find out by trying to sell it. But to circle back to your question about the funding, so at some point things are taking off, and our first round was also kind of a coincidence. When we saw that we were scaling up pretty fast and we were starting to hit a few 100,000 in just a couple of months, so a few 100,000 in ARR, I mean, we're like, okay, we have something at our hand. We should probably talk with people who have done this before, because we probably don't know what we're doing. And we knew a few really interesting people in this space. And I already mentioned in passing, I'm from Belgium. There's a few unicorns it's a very small country, right? It's like smaller than New York. So there's a few unicorns from there. And we just found ourselves to a few of those, probably the best well-known ones. And then also one of my still dear friend, Pascal Borremans. He was the CEO and founder of the largest independent Salesforce consulting firm. That was another person we reached out to. So types like that, we knew them through our network, or we hustled our way to get to talk to them. And we just wanted to have an advisory board. We're like, we want to have a meeting once a month and get some advice. And the reply we got from some people in that group was, well, that's cute, but we want to have a stake in this thing, to make it worth our while. So we said, like, well, I guess we can raise some funds, and it's also kind of funny because we raised that at a multiple which was higher than our CFO thought we would be able to get, and it wasn't that crazy. It was like I don't know if I can say, but it was stock market conform towards a higher end.
Nice.
But and it was honestly, by most standards, by my own standards today, it was a tiny amount. It was a little bit over 100,000. But at the time, I was like, oh wow, this is amazing. And the funny thing is, we never touched that money because we grew so fast after that we just had enough cash from all these annual paid upfront contracts. And only 6 months later, we then raised our seed round. This was in late 21, and that was a $5.5 million seed round. So that was a pretty juicy round. Doesn't compare to some of the crazy AI seed rounds you hear these days. The first SaaS company in 2021, that was still a little bit off the charts. And so, that's how that came to be.
Wow. What a story. There's so much in what you just said. So maybe we'll take like a little piece at a time.
Sure.
First of all, I could not agree more with the idea of selling before you build. Like, we have folks that come to us, they need some legal support. Yes, you do. You need good paper. You need clear contracts. Definitely. But if you're struggling to pay your bills, there's nothing to lose in a lawsuit, right?
Yeah.
So
exactly.
let's get you a little bit of what you need, but I want you to go find your customers.
Mm-hmm.
Go find the people to pay you. And I can say that now because I struggled with this for a really long time, actually. Now, I will say my very first client was a good friend of mine that needed to refinance their mortgage. And I was like, I can do that. No problem. Kind of similar thing. Never done it before, and I'm like, hopefully I don't lose my bar license with this whole thing. It was literally a $400 legal fee. Okay.
Yeah.
But I had one customer. And then I had another customer that was a paralegal that I had worked with who needed a no contest divorce. I was like, never done that, but I'll figure it out. And so even though I didn't really think of it in the way that you're saying it now, I did have enough of that risk tolerance to go out and actually just try to do something, say I can do it, knowing that I have confidence in myself. And you obviously had confidence in your co-founder as well. And I think sometimes it's that confidence that is the most lacking.
Yeah. And I think there was something interesting. Well, there are a few interesting things in what you just said, but for instance, the notion of if there's no contracts to begin with, if there's no sales, then there's nothing to lose and there's nothing at risk. I see this sort of hyper risk awareness sometimes among startups, although it's understandably less common in founders, you would hope, because they're more they tend to be bigger risk takers. But still, like amongst entrepreneurs, take for instance partnerships. A lot of people who approach partnerships immediately start thinking about contracts. And so I had a few other startups reach out to me, and some of them like not even like rookies, like, oh, how have you structured your partnership agreements? How do you for the really big ones, like with Salesforce, there are very standardized things. You're not going to be able to negotiate if you're tiny.
Sure.
Anywhere less than a billion in revenue a year, you're not going to have a negotiation stance towards a company like that. However, like in our ecosystem, there's all these consulting companies, system integrators, as they're known, and other tech companies that you may partner with, as we did. And the funny thing is that if I look back at that, I think the best partnerships were the one where we didn't even have a legal contract in place. Because in the end, you have so much to prove. And the hard part of this is not going to be the legal piece. It's going to be making sure we actually can go to market together and have a mutual shared value proposition that customers will pay money for. And then if afterward someone didn't, pay that kickback or that referral agreement or whatever it was that you said you were going to do, well, okay, then the partnership is over right away anyway. And then you might just leave it at that. So,
yeah.
Anyway,
I think it's really important because I see this a lot too, and I am a lawyer, so I know how important these agreements can become, and especially when there is a lot on the line, or there's IP, and there's a lot of things that can come up. But when you just don't have two pennies to scrape together, it's kind of like, and like you said, I've had clients come and they say, well, I have this big contract with this huge corporation, can you help me? And I'm like, I will redline, and I just want you to be aware that they may not accept what we recommend. Mm-hmm. So, if they don't, you have to be okay with that risk, and if you want the contract, take the risk.
Yeah. And sometimes there are these funny situations. I'm forgetting the exact wording or clause, but there was one time this pretty strict uptime clause that one of our customers wanted to have in the contract. And so uptime means like the software needs to be available at all time, which software as a service, which is hosted in the cloud, is kind of important. But their uptime requirement wasn't even that crazy. Like they wanted us to be online 99% of the time, which I don't think we were ever less than 99.9999% online throughout our whole existence. So easy, but the penalty for it was super high. Yeah. And then I had a discussion about this with my lawyer, and like, I don't know about that. I don't know what's. And actually, he gave really good advice at the time. He's like, well, basically said, dude, if you cannot meet this requirement, it means all your services went down, and you probably have a much bigger problem because you're probably out of business anyway. So.
Exactly. And sometimes the best advice from lawyers is the practical business advice of, hey, there's what lawyers think business should look like, and then there's what business actually is. Yeah. And most of the best business lawyers I know have been entrepreneurs, or are currently, or they're partners, and they have to make those big, tough choices. And that's not to say that contracts are not important, because I'm sure as you grew, you took that $5+ million, there was probably a lot of paperwork going on during that conversation.
Well, there's also a funny story there, actually. So there ended up being a lot of paperwork, but our investor was an amazing investor in the space and in software. And their name is adjacent. I think they will appreciate the mention. And so it was a very hot market at the time too, so things could move very fast. And I know most of your audience is American, but just for those few Europeans who are listening, the difference between European institutional investors and American institutional investors is wild. And so we were getting a few term sheets while we were raising our seed round. And then I think there was this one term sheet that was pretty good, but it was like a 30-pager, just a term sheet.
Term sheet? Wow.
Yeah. So it already had almost all the clauses you would put in a shareholders agreement. So it was just even a lot to digest. The term sheet of our investor, though, was a little bit over 1 page. And it was just very clearly phrased. It was also very common sense. What then made the paperwork afterwards heavier was the shareholders agreement. And that was heavier because my co-founder and I had put a founder agreement in place originally before we even started. And then that became a shareholder agreement when our angels came up. And that went more through the, shall we say, the European lens, which was a little bit more comprehensive than you might see otherwise. These days, there are all these structures like safes and so on that make raising so much easier. Yeah. And I think it's great because you don't want to waste a lot of time on this. You need to be, as a founder, you need to be going out and selling your vision and your product or your service. And
100%. It's so important. I really appreciate this conversation because, first of all, a term sheet, I mean, if I'm bored reading this thing by page 2 or 3, do I really want to do this? I mean, as I know, once we need to put the ink to paper on the closing, and we're actually going to be transferring dollars, and that it's really important to have all those details. But you got to just hit the high points so you know whether or not you can get to terms. If you can't get to terms, there's no reason to pay lawyers thousands and thousands of dollars. I tell people this all the time. I'm like, if you need me to negotiate for you, it's not going to work like that. You're going to have to bring me the terms. And then I'm going to say to you, well, we'll probably want to push back on this. And maybe we'll want to renegotiate that. That's a much better conversation. So I really appreciate your perspective there. And I do love safes. I absolutely love it. I love having those templates out there because once people get traction, that's when lawyers like me can really help. You're hiring people, you're expanding your market share. Those are really important things that need some more professional support. Let's go into okay. So we exit. It was I assume a very successful exit. Maybe you can't, I'm sure much of that's probably public, but what can you tell us about last year's exit? Because that was post AI boom, right? So you're a SaaS model. I know there's a lot of turmoil, obviously, in the SaaS industry now with AI, but that was a couple of years into the global phenomenon.
Right.
Tell us about that.
Oh, well, I think for us, it's true that this happened after the AI boom, which is still very much ongoing and still getting more traction. And it is true that a lot of SaaS companies were and still are suffering. Now, the best SaaS companies have already pivoted into offering more AI, and they can be very successful like that. We, at the time, we did a few things with AI. We were far from an AI native company. However, we had a decent amount of revenue, we had very good retention, and we had amazing customers. Our customers included and still include companies like Dell, Morgan Stanley, Volvo, really huge companies. And so even just the prestige of that helps. There's a lesson there too, by the way, for companies trying to be acquired. Of course, you never build a company, how shall I say it? You don't inform your biggest strategic decisions, I believe, by some certain acquisition hopes. You should inform it by what customers are willing to pay money for. But having said that, you should really understand the unique assets of your company, be they high retention, unique IP, great talent, great logos, and ideally a combination of those things.
Yes,
so yes, our exit was good. It was not an easy period to exit, but we had a short list of a few dozen interested parties that had actually, most of them had contacted us over time, some of them really big, well-known names. Now, we ended up with Unaric, and I think they were just an amazing fit for us. Unaric is a company that most people won't have heard of, because it's niche, and it's also because they are a growth company themselves. But they have done 9 acquisitions in the space in just the last 2 years.
Wow.
And have a big international footprint. And they're essentially building the AI listening layer. Now, us with our logos and our footprint in enterprise, we fit in beautifully there. Now, how that process has been it's interesting. As a founder, at a personal psychology level, your life changes completely overnight the moment you sell. It was a great feeling. It was personally life-changing for me too. And people can find us online. We sold the business for 8 figures, which is a happy amount for everyone involved. Now, I also had really good mentors. I have a group of friends that I see regularly, and all of them are CEO founders, and I'm the biggest rookie in the group, which I love. And all of them had already exited at least once. So all of them said the same thing, which is, the moment you sell, you're not in charge anymore. So get mentally ready for that. Mm-hmm. And fortunately, my new bosses are very cool people, and they're easy to work with. And I know that's not always the case from hearing other stories. So that makes it easier. But in a very short amount of time, direct reports got switched. A lot of the operational and responsibilities shifted to the executive leadership of Unaric that was already in place. And honestly, I'm very happy with that. I was happy to take a breather after what had been a very, very intense VC-backed race in a very, very turbulent market, both in SaaS and tech, and in the macro, as well as in the Salesforce ecosystem specifically. And it's interesting to see how a different leadership looks at certain things, where they put the attention versus what you might be doing yourself. I think the best advice is that, if you have a really good understanding as a soon-to-be acquired founder, CEO, that your responsibility is going to shift, and it might look a little bit different depending on the buyer, of course. The other day I was talking with a founder, and he actually took on a major executive role in a large enterprise, and he now still has a team of 60. So it's a different world than my world.
Right.
But he also has his own challenges, and it's very different from when he could call the shots on everything. Now he has to discuss a lot with people to get things done, and he has a lot of peers to deal with. For me, that's a little bit different. I don't have a huge team to manage anymore. But I understood from day one, okay, like this is not my company anymore. There's someone else's vision, and I'm here to help execute that vision. And more than anything, I want to make sure the integration of our companies work well. That's something I owe to our buyer, to my former employees, as well as to myself. It's just it feels like the right thing to do. So that's what we're doing. So making sure that people know how are things going to be in the future, what the new vision is, helping customers understand that too, of course, making sure they still feel cared for and that there's a future. That's all very important stuff.
It's so important. And it just shows like, I think that there are some founders that are naturally gifted at those kind of things. It sounds like studying psychology probably helped you in that regard in a big way, because being able to set aside personal interests to make sure that everyone else at the table, all the other stakeholders, right, are also going to benefit, that the value creation is going to expand for all involved, is, I think, the key to success for all of the great stewards of the world. I've been big on this stewardship idea. And I'm all about it. I told you we have this event coming up. It's all about stewardship and like, how do you take what you've been given, right? Which is your talent, whatever you're coming with, and turn that into a multiplier, not just for yourself, but for other people. And I think it's brilliant that you had that inner compass that kind of helped you stay grounded through what is extremely exciting. It's very fast moving. There is a lot of legal stuff going on. There's a lot of internal operational changes, as you alluded to. We've had clients that exited and, post-closing, the relationship was not what they anticipated it would be.
Happens a lot.
It happens a lot. Did you ever think about values and values alignment when you were looking for who you wanted to acquire you?
It was definitely something that came up in every conversation. And during the due diligence process, and we even did some reverse due diligence from our end, culture was a big topic. What we also immediately decided to do the moment the moment things got really, shall I say, serious with our acquirer, we also decided to fly out and go meet him. And so we did that like right away. And that ended up being, I think, a 10-hour workshop where we mostly showed our stuff, which makes sense because we're the one who's getting bought. But we used the opportunity to ask, I don't know how many questions, like constant barrage of questions. And then in the evening, the workshop was followed by dinner and multiple glasses of wine, and the questioning from both ends continued. And that way we could get a really good feel for the buyer too, and how they thought about the culture. And they have a really great fun culture. So for one example, because our team was to a large extent remote, and we had an office in Europe and in the US, for us it was always important to bring the whole team together once a year. And we did some really fun trips to Portugal and to the Canary Islands with our team, and so many fun memories. So it turned out our buyer did that too. And that's like one of these things you can see, okay, they have the same like cultural mindset. So yes, I think it's important.
Awesome. Yeah, it's really important. We really think that, you got to take care of people first, right? And I read Mike Michalowicz has the book Profit First. Have you heard of that book?
I have not actually, no.
It's a great book. I actually there's a certification program that they did for lawyers, Profit First for lawyers, but it's basically about financial discipline and not spending all your cash and making sure that, you are focused on profit, because you got to be able to fuel next quarter, right? You got to be able to fuel next year. And so it kind of helps with what I consider kind of smaller micro companies that are maybe going to be closely held and never exit or anything like that, but all of their personal wealth is like tied into this business machine. And I was just such a like profit first champion. And of course, being a very proud capitalist, I'm very, very much about profit first. But people really being profit first, in my opinion, means that you're people first. Because if you don't actually put the interest, like we were talking about with the stakeholders, your team needs connection. Your team needs support. You know, certain things happen on your team that are life-changing events. We've had several of those issues in our very small team here, where you wake up one day and all of a sudden, like, there is a tragedy afoot, and you have to ask yourself, who am I? And, this person didn't ask for this situation. This person shows up and does a great job every day. This person cares about where we're going. And I have a choice to either give them the freedom to handle what they need to deal with in their life, or not. And I want to be the former, not the latter. We're working towards this idea of going to like Canary Islands. Okay, we've been talking about these big grand trips, and so I'm hoping we're going to be getting there here in the next year or so to be doing that.
I recommend getting a catamaran out on the water. That was what we did. That was great. That was fun.
Yeah,
we even had a. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I love catamarans. Like, I love them.
Nice. Yeah, and we even got a guy with a drone to join us, and then had the drone fly around, and we made an after movie of that. I don't know if that's still online. I think that might have faded over time, because this was one from the very first company gathering we did, but very very fun memories. Well, and values are so important in business, and I think Mark Benioff, that's Salesforce's CEO, he said that very beautifully. He said, "Values create value."
Yeah, exactly. It's so true. Well, we're gonna wrap it up here, because I don't want to take much more of your time. I'm sure you want to get off into your weekend. Let's talk a little bit about lucid dreaming.
Sure.
And tell us, what do you think folks should understand about lucid dreaming, and how the ideas around tapping into your subconscious mind might be able to help them just live a better life?
Well, I think you already hinted at the answer. I think the ability that lucid dreaming offers to tap in your subconscious is incredibly powerful. So real quick, what is lucid dreaming for those who don't know? I assume anyone listening has had a dream before. Well, imagine if during that dream you start to realize you're dreaming, and you're fully aware of it. And then often what happens is you can take control of the dream. Now, almost everyone has had a lucid dream, but usually it's a lucid nightmare. Many people have had the experience where they're in a nightmare and then they go, "Oh, I know this is a nightmare. I'm going to wake myself up." Well, the fact that you were able to have that reflection and wake yourself up shows that you actually were aware. Now, imagine that in a happy scene where you can become aware. Often what people will do is like just really fun stuff like flying. You can literally experience flying like a bird, or one of my coolest experiences was that I was floating in space in front of Jupiter, and that was just an awe-inspiring feeling. So there's fun to be had. For one, it's like the ultimate VR. On the other hand, more and more what has been showing up in the last few years is that it's a profound channel to do work on yourself, or even to do certain forms of performance coaching. And so there are many great therapies out there these days, for instance, that heal PTSD. But I found it really almost shocking when I learned that lucid dreaming can heal PTSD, which is a pretty serious affliction. But it makes sense, because what you're doing in a lucid dream is you're directly, consciously engaging with your subconscious. And so whether it's a trauma that can be healed, or it's a skill you want to improve, like say public speaking, you can improve it. And people do. And it's very well supported by research too. Like, many people have heard of these. I'll put it this way: one of my good friends is a former jet fighter pilot, and they had them, like, once they were burned out practicing at the controls and just flying all day, they would still visualize at night practicing being in front of the control, because it's backed by science. If you just mentally rehearse something, it almost trains your brain as well as actually doing the activity. Well, imagine that, and then times 10 because you're directly engaging with your subconscious. That's what lucid dreaming offers. And that's why I am passionate about it, not just because it's fun, but because I have this hunch that this might be one of the next frontiers for humanity, truly, in understanding ourselves and up-leveling who we are.
Amazing. I was so taken aback when you shared that with the group this past summer, and I really agree with you wholeheartedly. I'm a big proponent of personal development and visualization. And so if you can visualize when you're aware, how much more effective can you be if you can actually visualize during the many hours that you're asleep, right? And it's a long time that you spend. Your physical body's recharging, but your brain never stops. And so how can you control it? And maybe we can tap into more than the 10-ish% or so that we're currently using, right?
I think so. And also this is fully trainable, because once in a while I encounter someone who has the notion that only a few people can have lucid dreams, or only a few people even remember their dreams. Yes, that's true by default, but it's absolutely trainable. And I believe anyone can learn it in a relatively short amount of time if you know how to.
It's awesome. Are you writing or anything about that right now?
So I began a community here out of Austin, but meanwhile it has developed into a website with some training materials, and I've been doing some courses. So people can go to www.oneros.org. So that's ONEROS. I'm sure we can share the link. It's it's derived from the ancient Greek word for dream, oneiros, but spelled a little bit different.
Very cool. I can't wait to hear more about that, Anthony, because I have no doubt that in a short time you're going to be back to say, and now we are raising our funds for for the next thing.
Who knows? Who knows?
So, well, you gave them the website. I'm sure they can find you on LinkedIn. We're obviously going to share all of your contact info and information that you gave us in the show notes. But is there any parting statement or idea that you want to leave with our audience before we say goodbye?
Well, I think being a founder has been amazing. We talked a little bit about psychology, and I think I've learned more about psychology by being a CEO founder, often through very humbling lessons, often through a lot of setbacks, than I ever did studying my master's in psychology. It's tough. And if you're going through a tough moment right now, you're listening to that, hang in there. You can do this. And I wish everyone best of luck.
Awesome. Anthony, thank you. We hope to see you at our event. We're going to be getting you all that information. Awesome. Everyone, I hope you enjoyed this. I mean, I'm sure as you listen to Anthony, you see what I see, what a brilliant mind, but also just a humble heart. Anthony is a visionary, and I think we're going to see more from him. So please check him out. And as always, thank you for tuning in. Be sure that you like, subscribe, share, and do all the things that I'm supposed to say on this podcast with your friends, and share out Anthony's story. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to the show. Remember, stay sharp, stay curious, and stay tuned for our next episode. Bye for now.